They told me to stay quiet at the meeting. "You're just the assistant," they said. "Let the executives talk." So I sat and listened. Then, when the CEO walked in and asked for the founder, everyone froze. I stood up. "That's me." My name is Sarah, and my life's work began in a half-acre plot of stubbornly rocky soil in rural Oregon, with a handful of heirloom seeds inherited from my grandmother. They weren't just seeds, they were stories. A tomato variety carried by immigrants. From Italy, a drought-resistant bean cultivated by Native American farmers, a squash thought to be long lost. For me, saving these seeds was an act of rebellion against a world of bland, uniform produce. It was a promise to the past and a gift to the future. That small garden grew into Legacy Seeds, a company built not on profit margins, but on a philosophy of biodiversity, sustainability, and community. We supplied seeds to a network of small organic farms, dedicated gardeners, and chefs who understood that flavor begins with heritage. My late husband, a man who believed in me more than I believed in myself, helped me build our first greenhouse. After he was gone, the company became my sanctuary and my purpose. Over 2 decades, we grew. Our reputation for quality and integrity spread quietly but persistently. And then it spread to a place I never expected: the boardroom of Global Harvest, one of the largest agribusiness conglomerates in the country. They saw the burgeoning market for organic heirloom products and wanted a piece of our authenticity. A partnership, they called it. An acquisition, I feared. But the potential to bring our seeds to a wider audience, to protect these rare varieties on a larger scale, was too significant to ignore. Navigating their corporate world was beyond my expertise. So, I did what everyone advised. I hired professionals. I brought on a sharp young man with a freshly minted MBA, let's call him Mark, as our director of growth. He was all sleek suits and confident jargon, speaking of brand narratives and leveraging our story. I also retained a high-powered law firm, with our main contact being a woman named Jennifer. She was brilliant, meticulous, and viewed our precious seed bank primarily as a collection of intellectual assets to be monetized and protected. They arranged the meeting in their territory, a sterile, glass-walled conference room on the 48th floor of a skyscraper in Chicago. Looking out the window at the endless grid of streets and steel, I felt a million miles away from the smell of damp earth and the quiet satisfaction of watching a seed sprout. I wore a simple linen dress and a hand-carved wooden pin my husband had made for me. Mark and Jennifer wore expensive dark suits that seemed to absorb the light in the room. We met an hour early for a prep session. Mark paced the length of the vast mahogany table, a bundle of nervous energy. "Okay, Sarah," he began, "just to reiterate our strategy. Jennifer and I will handle the presentation and all fiscal and legal questions. We need to project a seamless, professional front. These Global Harvest people are sharks. They need to see a structure they recognize and can work with." Jennifer nodded, not looking up from her notes. "The optics are paramount. They need to feel they are partnering with a business, not a passion project. A passion project. 30 years of my life, distilled into a dismissive phrase. "I understand," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "I'm prepared to discuss the genetics of our seeds, our germination rates, our network of farmers." "No," Mark said, stopping his pacing to face me. His expression was one of strained patience, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "Actually, the consensus is that it's better if you don't speak unless you're directly asked a technical question. And even then, keep it very brief." I felt the blood rise in my cheeks. "Not speak." "Mark, I founded this company. Every seed in our catalog has a story, a history that I personally curated. And that is your immense value," Jennifer interjected smoothly, finally looking up. Her gaze was cool, appraising. But in this room, that passion can be misconstrued as sentimentality, as a lack of business acumen. It introduces risk. For the purpose of this meeting, think of yourself as a senior technical consultant. The founder, the heart of the company, yes, but not the executive voice. Mark stepped in, trying a more placating tone. "She's right, Sarah. For today, just for these few hours, consider yourself my assistant. It simplifies things. They see me as the business lead, Jennifer, as legal. It's a clean, familiar structure for them. It allows us to control the narrative." The humiliation was a physical thing. a heavy weight in my chest. To be silenced in a room where the subject was my own life's work. To be told my passion was a liability. I thought of the farmers who trusted me, who saw me as their partner, their advocate. I thought of my husband's faith in me. I was being asked to perform a role, to be a quiet, compliant woman, while the men in suits and the woman in a suit decided the fate of my legacy. The potential of the deal, the good it could do for the preservation of these seeds, was the only thing that kept me from walking out. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I choked it down for the greater good. I understand, I managed to say. I'll let you lead. When the team from Global Harvest entered, I had already taken a seat slightly back from the main table, my notepad open, a glass of water poured for Mark, playing the part they had assigned me. Their executives were just as polished and impersonal as the boardroom. They shook hands with Mark and Jennifer, their eyes gliding over me with the polite disinterest one affords the room's furniture. Mark began his presentation, a symphony of corporate buzzwords set against a slideshow of my beautiful, sun-drenched farm. He talked of synergies, market verticals, and optimizing the supply chain. He presented my life's philosophy as a unique brand identity, a marketing angle to be exploited. He was selling them a hollowed-out, shrink-wrapped version of legacy seeds, and I had to sit there and silently endorse it. One of their team members asked a sharp question about our strategy for preventing cross-pollination in our open field. Crops. Mark, who had only ever seen the fields on a sunny day during a curated tour, gave a vague answer he'd clearly memorized from a brief I'd written. He couldn't speak to the long nights of planning, the intricate dance of planting times and isolation distances, the deep practical knowledge required. He couldn't tell the real story. I bit my tongue and made a note on my pad. The meeting was droning on when the door opened again. A man in his late 60s or early 70s entered, exuding an aura of calm, undisputed power. The posture of everyone from Global Harvest subtly shifted, straightening, becoming more attentive. This had to be the CEO. My apologies, he said, his voice a low baritone that cut through the room's stale air. My flight was delayed. Please, continue. He sat at the head of the table and listened for a few minutes as Mark stumbled on, trying to regain his rhythm. Then, the CEO held up a hand. Thank you, son, he said, a phrase that was both folksy and utterly dismissive. I've seen the projections. I've read the reports. What I'm interested in isn't on these slides. He looked around the table, his gaze sharp. A company like this, it isn't built on spreadsheets. It's built on a belief system, on a single person's obsession. I've learned that the hard way. Everything else is just noise. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the room, passing over Mark and Jennifer as if they were transparent. So, I'm going to ask a simple question. Where is the founder? Where is the person who put their hands in the dirt and started all of this? I want to hear from them. The silence that descended was absolute. It was a tangible thing, a heavy blanket smothering the room. Mark and Jennifer froze, their faces a mixture of stark terror and disbelief. Their carefully orchestrated presentation, their entire strategy, had just been rendered irrelevant. They had built a stage, and the main actor was, by their own instruction, sitting silently in the audience. I looked at their panicked faces, at the CEO's expectant, intelligent gaze. The years of hard work, the quiet mornings in the greenhouse, the sting of being sidelined in this cold glass box, it all came to a single point. This was my moment. I calmly placed my pen down. I pushed back my chair, the soft scrape of its legs against the floor sounding like a cannon blast in the silence. I stood up, every head turned towards me. I met the CEO's gaze, my own steady and clear. That's me, I said. The silence in that 48th floor boardroom was a physical presence, a thick, unbreathable atmosphere. I saw the color drain from Mark's face, leaving behind a pale mask of disbelief. Jennifer's pen froze mid-notation, her expression a perfect portrait of carefully controlled panic. The entire Global Harvest team, moments before focused on their spreadsheets and legal pads, now stared at me. The quiet woman in the linen dress, the assistant who had just claimed ownership of the entire proceeding. Mr. Cole, the CEO, didn't seem surprised at all. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of his mouth. He looked at me, then at Mark, who finally found his voice, sputtering to life in a desperate attempt at damage control. Yes, Mr. Cole, of course. Mark stammered, a frantic energy in his voice. "This is Sarah, our founder, the visionary behind the Legacy Seeds brand. My apologies. I was merely setting the financial and strategic framework before turning the floor over to her for the more philosophical components of our brand story. It was a clumsy, transparent lie, and we all knew it. Mr. Cole didn't even grace him with a glance. His gaze remained fixed on me. He gestured with a large, weathered hand, the hand of a man who had perhaps once worked his own land, towards the empty, high-backed leather chair beside him at the head of the table. "Please, Sarah," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through Mark's babbling. "The framework is noted. Now, I'd like to hear the story." Walking from my subordinate seat to that place of honor felt like crossing a vast divide. I was leaving the territory they had assigned me and stepping onto my own ground. I sat, placing my simple notepad on the gleaming mahogany. I felt the weight of expectation from the Global Harvest team, the searing heat of humiliation from my own. I took a steadying breath, letting go of the anger and the resentment. They were useless emotions. What I needed now was the truth. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," I began, my voice clear and even, stripped of the tremor I'd felt earlier. To understand Legacy Seeds, you can't start with a spreadsheet. You have to start with a memory. The key. Memory of a 9-year-old girl in her grandmother's garden in the Willamette Valley. My grandmother would let me help her save seeds. She'd show me how to scoop them from a ripe tomato, wash them, and dry them on a piece of cheesecloth on the windowsill. She told me each seed was a promise, a tiny piece of history passed down through generations. That tomato, she'd say, was the great-great-grandchild of one her own mother had brought over from the old country. It wasn't just food, it was a connection. It was our legacy. I looked around the table, at the faces of these people who dealt in billions of dollars. I needed them to understand that this was not a marketing angle. Legacy Seeds didn't start with a business plan, I continued. It started in my own backyard after my husband, my dear husband, passed away. The garden was my solace. I started seeking out other nearly forgotten varieties, connecting with old farmers and gardeners, people who, like my grandmother, were quiet custodians of this incredible biodiversity. I found a bean variety that had been cultivated for centuries by a small community of farmers in the Appalachians, a beautiful purple marbled corn from the Hopi people in Arizona. Each seed had a name, a place, a story. My husband helped me build our first greenhouse. He used to say I was building a living library, and he was right. I could see Mark shifting uncomfortably in his chair. This was not the sleek, scalable narrative he had prepared. This was something messy, personal, and real. Our company grew from that library. We didn't have investors. We had partners. Farmers like a man named Eli in Pennsylvania who grows our Brandywine tomatoes. I don't just buy his seeds. I know his children's names. I know about the drought that almost wiped him out 3 years ago, and I know the joy in his voice when he talks about the flavor of a fruit grown from a healthy, open-pollinated seed. Our network is built on that trust, that shared belief. We guarantee our farmers a fair price, and they, in turn, provide us with seeds of unparalleled quality and genetic purity. This isn't a supply chain, Mr. Cole. It is a community, a human ecosystem. I leaned forward, my passion finally overriding any lingering sense of intimidation. Your team has seen projections about market growth for organic and heirloom products. Those numbers are real, but they are a symptom of a deeper hunger in this country, a hunger for connection. People want to know where their food comes from. They want to taste something real. They want to hold a piece of history in their hands. That is what we sell. Not just seeds. We sell stories. We sell connection. We sell a promise that what is precious and unique will not be lost to the world. Of industrial monoculture, I then addressed the question the young agronomist on their team had asked earlier, the one Mark had fumbled. I spoke of the challenges of preventing genetic drift, the precise isolation distances we maintained, the rigorous testing we did season after season. I explained the difference between a hybrid seed designed for a single season of uniform output and an heirloom seed, a living thing designed to adapt and be saved, to be passed on. My voice was filled with the authority of someone who had spent 30 years with their hands in the dirt, not just their eyes on a screen. When I finished, a different kind of quiet settled over the room. It was the quiet of consideration, of minds recalibrating. Mr. Cole was the one who broke it. He looked at me, a deep respect in his eyes. "Thank you, Sarah," he said. "That was the most compelling presentation I've heard in a decade." He then turned his gaze on Mark. "Your projections were based on dramatically increasing output and creating uniform seed lines. How did you plan to achieve that with the methods Sarah just described?" Mark looked like a deer in the headlights. We believed that with certain efficiencies, we could streamline the heritage process." "You can't streamline heritage, son," Mr. Cole said, his voice flat. He looked back to me. "Sarah, I came here today prepared to discuss acquiring a brand. But you're not a brand. You're a living library, as you said, and you're its chief librarian. So let me ask you, what do you need from a partner like us?" The power had shifted so completely, it was almost dizzying. I took a breath. "I don't need a partner to change our philosophy. I need a partner to protect it and to help it grow. I need funding for a larger climate-controlled seed bank to preserve more varieties. I need investment to create an educational foundation to teach the next generation of farmers and gardeners the art of seed saving. And I need a distribution network that understands they are handling something precious, not just another commodity. I need a partner who wants to invest in a real legacy, not just acquire a story for their marketing department." Mr. Cole nodded. Slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. He stood up. "I'm canceling my flight this evening," he announced to his team. "I'm flying to Oregon tomorrow. I want to see this farm. I want to walk through this library." He looked directly at me. "Sarah, my office will be in touch with you this afternoon to coordinate. I hope you'll be available to show me around." "I will," I said, my voice steady. "I would be delighted." He and his team filed out of the room, each one of them looking at me with a new light in their eyes. The door clicked shut, leaving the three of us in the vast, silent boardroom. Jennifer was staring at her legal pad as if it held the secrets of the universe. Mark stood by the window, his back to me, his perfect suit now seeming like a hollow. Costume. The air was thick with the wreckage of their strategy and the undeniable presence of my own reclaimed power. The real meeting was over, and a new one was about to begin. The heavy oak door of the boardroom clicked shut, and in the ensuing silence, the three of us stood in a tableau of shattered alliances. The air, which moments before had crackled with the energy of a decisive victory, was now thick and suffocating with the fallout. Mark stared at the cityscape through the floor-to-ceiling window, his shoulders so rigid they looked like they might snap his expensive suit jacket. Jennifer was methodically, silently, placing her pens into her briefcase. Each click a tiny, sharp punctuation mark in the vast, awkward quiet. Her professional mask was back in place, but it was brittle now, unable to hide the fury in her eyes. It was Mark who spoke first, turning slowly from the window. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" he said, his voice low and seething. "You went completely off script. You undermined our entire strategy. We had a plan, a professional, tested approach, and you threw it away for what? To tell folksy stories about your grandmother?" Jennifer snapped her briefcase shut. "The potential for liability here is staggering," she said, her voice like ice. "You've engaged the CEO directly, made verbal representations about your vision without legal counsel present. You've sidelined your appointed business development lead. You've made us look incompetent. He'll use that against us in the negotiations. He'll lowball the offer, knowing the leadership is fractured." I listened to them, and I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing them from a great distance. The fear and intimidation I had felt just an hour ago had completely evaporated, replaced by a calm, unshakable certainty. They still didn't get it. They were still playing their game, while I, and more importantly Mr. Cole, had decided to play a different one entirely. "There is no us anymore in these negotiations," I said, my voice quiet but firm, carrying across the cavernous room. "There is only me." Mr. Cole made that perfectly clear. He is coming to Oregon because he is interested in the company I built, not the generic, scalable shell you tried to sell him. I looked at Mark. "He isn't interested in your brand narrative. He wants the real story." I then turned to Jennifer. "And he isn't interested in a hostile takeover disguised as a partnership. He's interested in a mission he can invest in." Your services were retained to help me achieve a partnership, not to erase me from the process. It appears you have failed. The finality in my tone hung in the air. This wasn't a debate. It was a dismissal. Thank you both for your time and your strategic insights, I continued, picking up my simple canvas bag. I will be in touch with your firms regarding the termination of our contracts. I walked out of that room without a backward glance, leaving them in the cold, silent aftermath of their own failed strategy. The flight back to Portland was a dream. I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of their condescension, of trying to fit my life's work into their narrow corporate boxes, was gone. As the plane descended over the lush green patchwork of the Willamette Valley, I felt I could finally breathe again. This was my world, the world of rich soil and tall firs, and I was bringing the conversation back here, to my home turf. I spent the next 2 days in a state of nervous, joyful anticipation. I didn't stage the farm. I didn't hire a cleaning crew or try to make it look like something it wasn't. I simply made sure it was its truest self. I walked the rows of sprouting beans and budding squash, pulling a few errant weeds. I checked on the greenhouses, the air thick and humid, alive with the scent of tomato vines and damp earth. I called my small team together, my farm manager, a sturdy, quiet man named Eli, and the 2 young women who helped me with packing and shipping, and told them what had happened. I told them the CEO of Global Harvest was coming, not to inspect a potential asset, but to understand our work. There was a nervous energy among them, but also a deep, fierce pride. We were ready. Mr. Cole arrived on a sunny Friday morning in a sensible American-made rental sedan, not the Blacktown car I had half expected. He was dressed in dark trousers and a simple, well-made work shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He was alone. The lack of an entourage was the first sign that this visit was exactly what he'd said it would be. A genuine effort to understand. "Sarah," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, his smile tired but genuine. "Thank you for having me. Your farm is even more beautiful than the pictures in your consultant's presentation." The faint, ironic emphasis on the word consultant was not lost on me. Our tour began not with the plants, but with the soil. I had him kneel down to scoop up a handful of our dark, fragrant earth. "This is where it all starts, Mr. Cole," I explained. "This isn't just dirt. It's a living thing. We've spent 20 years building this soil with cover crops, compost, and without a single drop of chemical fertilizer. What we do isn't just organic, it's regenerative. We're not just taking from the land, we're giving back to it. That's the first principle of a true legacy." He let the soil run through his fingers, a thoughtful expression on his face. "My father was a farmer in Iowa," he said quietly. He would have understood this. We moved on to the seed bank, my little climate-controlled library of life. His eyes, so sharp and intimidating in the boardroom, now held a sense of wonder as I showed him the glass jars, each meticulously labeled. I took down the jar of Cherokee Trail of Tears beans, the ones I had mentioned in Chicago. I poured a few of the small, jet-black seeds into his palm. "This seed has survived a forced march, a civil war, and the industrialization of our entire food system," I told him. "It has survived because generations of people believed it was worth saving. That's the responsibility we have. When you hold this, you're holding a piece of American history, a piece of real resilience." We walked for hours. I introduced him to Eli, who spoke passionately about our crop rotation schedule. We visited a neighboring farm run by a young couple who were part of our grower network. They showed him how our specific variety of blight-resistant potatoes had saved their season. He saw the human ecosystem I had described, the network of trust and shared values. He saw the truth. We ended the day on my porch, the same porch where my husband and I had dreamed up this whole impossible venture, drinking iced tea as the sun began to set behind the Oregon Coast Range. "You have something remarkable here, Sarah?" Mr. Cole said, breaking a long, comfortable silence. "What I saw in Chicago, that was a sales pitch for a generic brand. This is a cause, and a damn good business built on it." He leaned forward. "I meant what I said. I want to partner with you, not to absorb you, not to change you, to protect you. I propose Global Harvest helps you establish the Legacy Seeds Foundation, an independent entity with its own charter, to own and protect your entire seed bank in perpetuity, ensuring it can never be sold off or patented. By a corporate entity, we will provide the primary funding. In return, Global Harvest gets a long-term, exclusive partnership to market and distribute your seeds through a new co-branded Artisan's Table line. Your story, your integrity, front and center. We will invest in your farmer network and your educational programs. We don't want to streamline your heritage. We want to be the ones who help you preserve it for the world. I looked at him, this powerful man, the head of a global corporation, and I saw the farmer's son from Iowa. He understood. He truly understood. That, I said, a lump forming in my throat, is a partnership I would be proud to accept. We shook hands, not as corporate adversaries, but as two people who, despite coming from vastly different worlds, shared a fundamental understanding of what it means to build something that lasts. As he drove away, leaving a small cloud of dust on the gravel road, I stood on my porch, a profound sense of peace settling over me. I had been told to stay quiet, to be an assistant to my own story. But by speaking up, I hadn't just saved a meeting. I had secured a future for my company, my farmers, and my seeds, a future that was bigger and brighter than I had ever dared to imagine. The handshake on my porch with Mr. Cole was not an ending, but the starting pistol for a race I hadn't known I was prepared to run. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity, but it was a different kind of storm from the corporate tempest in Chicago. This was a storm of creation, of building. Mr. Cole was true to his word. His office, a team of lawyers and project managers, was instructed to work with me, and the difference in tone was night and day. They didn't see me as a sentimental obstacle. They saw me as the visionary, the essential core of the entire endeavor. My first act was to formally terminate my contracts with Mark and Jennifer. I hired a new lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman from Portland who specialized in nonprofits and ethical business law. When Jennifer's firm sent a threatening letter demanding an exorbitant termination fee for their strategic services, my new lawyer simply responded with a calm, point-by-point rebuttal, noting their failure to act in my best interest and their misrepresentation of my company's core assets. The threat evaporated into a quiet, face-saving settlement that cost them more in reputation than it cost me in dollars. Mark, characteristically, tried a different approach. About a month into the new partnership planning, I received a long, rambling email from him. It was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, congratulating me on my astute maneuvering and the paradigm-shifting partnership I had secured. He spoke of our shared journey and suggested that, given his familiarity with the brand narrative, he would be the ideal candidate to lead the new foundation or act as a liaison with Global Harvest. It was breathtaking in its audacity. He was trying to sell me my own story back again. I wrote a brief, polite reply. Thank you for your thoughts, Mark. However, the foundation will be led by people who have spent their lives with their hands in the soil, not in a boardroom. I wish you well in your future ventures. I never heard from him again. With them firmly in the past, the real work began. The Legacy Seeds Foundation was not just a name. It became a legally binding entity, its charter co-written by me and Mr. Cole's best people. I insisted on terms that would have made Jennifer's hair stand on end. The seed bank was to be held in trust, inviolable, with a mission dedicated purely to preservation and education, firewalled from any profit-driven motives of the parent company. I would be the lifetime chair of its board. Mr. Cole agreed to every term without hesitation. The influx of capital from Global Harvest was transformative. Within the year, ground was broken on a new, state-of-the-art, climate-controlled seed bank and a beautiful educational center built with sustainable Oregon timber right on the edge of my farm. The sight of construction crews working not to build another corporate office, but to build a sanctuary for heritage was a daily affirmation. We were able to offer grants to our network of farmers, giving them the financial security to expand their operations and dedicate more acreage to our rare varieties. Eli, my farm manager, could finally afford the new tractor he'd needed for years. We hired more staff, including a full-time botanist and 2 educators. I found myself in a new role. I was still Sarah, the woman who loved the feel of the earth, but I was also the head of a major foundation. I sat in boardrooms again, but now they were our boardrooms, and my voice was the one people leaned in to hear. I traveled not as a nervous business owner, but as a respected expert, invited to speak at sustainable agriculture conferences. During one such talk, I spoke of the global importance of biodiversity, of how our work in Oregon was part of a larger human story. The same love and care we put into saving an Appalachian bean, I told the audience, is mirrored by farmers in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco protecting ancient wheat, or communities in the Andes preserving thousands of varieties of potato. This isn't just my story, it's a shared human legacy we have a sacred duty to protect. 2 years after that fateful meeting in Chicago, our new educational center opened. Mr. Cole flew in for the ceremony. He was older, moving a little slower, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence. We stood together, watching a group of school children on a field trip, their faces alive with wonder as they looked at the vast library of seeds behind the glass walls. They were learning to shell beans, their small hands working with a focus that moved me to tears. "You see that, Sarah?" Mr. Cole said quietly, nodding towards the children. "That's a return on investment you can't put on a balance sheet." You were right. Your passion wasn't the liability, it was the entire asset. The company, Legacy Seeds, in its co-branded partnership with Global Harvest, thrived beyond anyone's projections. The authenticity I had fought to protect became its greatest commercial strength. And the revenue, as the story goes, did indeed surpass that of any of Daniel's... Wait, I was telling the other story. The revenue surpassed what any quick sale or corporate streamlining could have produced. My new company, born from the ashes of the old, had become more successful than I could have imagined. But the numbers, I had come to realize, were the least interesting part of the story. My real accomplishment was not financial. It was the look on a young farmer's face when she realized she could make a living saving the seeds her great-grandmother had planted. It was the text from Eli telling me the new irrigation system was working perfectly. It was the quiet hum of the climate control system in the seed bank, standing guard over thousands of irreplaceable stories. I never needed an apology from Mark or Jennifer. Their silence was its own kind of verdict. They had been taught to see the world as a series of assets to be leveraged, and in doing so, had failed to see the most valuable asset of all, the truth. They had told me to be quiet, to be an assistant in my own life. But I learned that day in Chicago that a person's power isn't granted by a title or a position at a table. It comes from the quiet, unshakable knowledge of your own worth and the courage to stand up and claim your own story in your own voice. And that is a legacy no one can ever sell.